All right. And so for today we have a guy I've been watching on YouTube for a while named Lunch Break Heroes. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. This is Steve from Lunch Break Heroes. As has already been stated, it's fantastic to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being on. I think I talked to him about this before we started recording, but in the other video with Duke Sloth, I mentioned we had an issue with time zone problems, and same thing happened. I don't know time, is what I've found out about myself.
It's rather wibbly wobbly, I've heard.
Yeah, it really is. Um, but tell us about a little bit about what you do first, just for the people at home.
Well, I make videos on YouTube. We send around Dungeons and Dragons. Um, I started Lunch Break Heroes on my lunch break, actually, at my day job. So I would sit in my office and I would record these videos on my little Pixel phone, and I would upload them to YouTube. And eventually, got a bit of a viewership going and settled into sort of a content niche, if you will.
Hmm.
And here we are, a couple of years on, closing in on 3 years this December, and things are going fantastic and no sign of slowing down.
Yeah, and I saw your I mean your stuff's especially your Strahd stuff's picking up. And because it's like I Curse of Strahd's the first campaign I ever ran. Well, it was the I had done some like shorter stuff before, but I had never done like a full campaign, and I was still pretty new to DMing. Um, and for your first, Curse of Strahd is not a very first DM friendly campaign.
It's really not.
But because I'm a big Castlevania fan, and I think when we were messaging each other before, you mentioned you were going to be watching the new season when it comes out.
Oh yeah, that's
Oh,
totally my plan on the 13th and the 14th. I've
I'm
started rewatching it.
Me too, right? I'm so excited. I love it so much. The show is amazing. Um, did you ever play any of the games when you were younger?
I most certainly did, actually. And this is a weird thing that I've come to grips with as an adult. And my parents were huge gamers.
Oh,
I didn't
cool.
quite realize that as a child, however, but my mom played the heck out of Castlevania. Just the originals, and then number two, where Alucard was first introduced, which is actually the game that the series is based off
Hmm.
of. Um, she played those and was insanely good at them, and I'm terrible at video games. I've come to grips with that as well over the
That's why you
years.
play
But yeah,
D&D.
yeah, because I suck at video games.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I played the one right before Symphony of the Night, the one where you play as Richter.
I wish I could tell you which one that was, but I have no idea.
But I remember I was terrible at it because I was so young when I played that, and it was at a friend's house. Um, I thought it was really dumb that your character uses a whip. But I thought it was. I mean, it was. Yeah, my parents were religious. They raised me, and I went to church and everything, and I was like, oh my god, I'm using Jesus to kill vampires. This is pretty cool. But yeah, I thought it was. I thought the ideas behind it were really good. I think the game today is a bit rough at certain points, especially the older ones. But hey, they are almost 20, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they go back to that Nintendo hard era,
Yes.
back when, games were meant to chew up quarters more than they were to entertain.
Mm-hmm. Um, but so wait, so most of your content on your channel is related to Curse of Strahd. Is it safe to assume that's your favorite D&D module?
That is a pretty safe assumption. And it's more based around the fact that that's where the audience is,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just a really happy coincidence. Um, so my group got finished with Lost Mine of Phandelver, and
Nice.
they got to the end, and then they made some very terrible decisions, and TPK'd against the final boss.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I ran
and
into that's actually well, sorry to interrupt you, but that's really interesting because that was what happened with my group was we just run Lost Mines of Phandelver, and then I took it to Curse of Strahd afterwards. But that's really interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, they decided to Leroy Jenkins the whole ending, and
Hmm.
it didn't work out for them. But then I pulled my group. I'm like, all right, what do you guys want to play next? And I gave them some choices of just themes. I didn't give them the names. I'm like, okay, do you want high fantasy? Do you want low fantasy? Do you want gothic horror? And they chose gothic horror almost unanimously. And so we started running Curse of Strahd, and I began researching it and all of that. So I ran across all the other guides and whatnot on Reddit, Dragna Carta, Mandy Mod, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And at that point, even their guides were still in somewhat of a fledgling state. Um, and I was making videos about Lost Mine of Phandelver at the same time there. So it was a natural progression for me to go into making Curse of Strahd videos. And it was luck. It was serendipity to
Hmm.
fall into creating content for a module that has such a wide and very supportive community.
Oh yeah, that's the because like I said, I was a pretty new DM when I did it, and I was so surprised that the community for it was so big, and not only that, but they were so nice and welcoming, especially like on Discord. Because I forgot what it was, but I think it was I got to the witches the windmill, or
Mhm.
the night hags, and I to speak to how Curse of Strahd is, I think it's quite unbalanced at certain points, but I think that's on purpose to give the
Oh,
DM more
very
control.
much intentionally so.
Exactly, right. And so essentially what happens for the people at home is your characters are pretty low level when they leave the first part of Barovia, which is the land it takes place in. And in one of the first things they do is they go through this thing called Death House, and it's just a basically gets your characters level 1 to 3. And within the house they find a deed to a windmill. Now, when they go to the next part of the game, which is they go to this town called Vallaki. On their way there, they see a windmill, and it's not hard to put two and two together and say this is the deed to this windmill. So they go and check it out, and read as written, I think it's pretty easy to put together that the women living in this windmill are eating children or using children to make pie, and so your characters, assuming they're the heroic type, are going to try and fight them. Thing is, these witches are like for a party of like level 5 adventurers. And so
And
it's
even then, they're pretty challenging.
for real, it's especially because there's three of them, and that's
Yeah.
just it's crazy. And your characters,
Yeah.
you can try to get them there at like level 4. You can give them a
Right.
level up at somewhere
And
between level.
and again, for those folks at home, when you have one or two hags, it's not a big deal. I mean, it's
Mhm.
still kind of a challenge, but it's not a big deal. But when you get three hags together, they form a coven,
Yeah.
and it's basically like Voltron. Okay, they get together, and it's their powers combined, and they're gonna kick your butt.
And to mention, one of them has a pot of ichor that can summon smaller monsters, and your thing just gets filled. And so it was reading that and understanding how totally boned my players were going to be that I looked up how to deal with that, and I found your videos. And
Very cool.
I think because they hadn't met Morgantha yet, so or no, they had, but you were the one. It was your video that was like, when they get to the windmill, don't describe them it being dirty and there being bones and stuff everywhere.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's totally immaculate downstairs.
And so yeah, I was like, whoa, and then I saw you had a bunch of videos on it, and I was like, oh, this is really cool stuff. And it was super super like helpful, and I do appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
But
Pleasure to be of help.
so what is it about Curse of Strahd do you think that really made it stand out to you and makes it your favorite?
Well, overall, horror and gothic horror it's kind of my jam. I've always enjoyed horror and vampires and werewolves and stuff like that. Even as a small child, maybe, 8 or 9 years old, I was going to the public library and getting these books on werewolf lore.
Hmm.
So, I've always had this fascination with the dark, the creepy, the things that go bump in the night. And to have an entire Dungeons and Dragons campaign centered around those themes is great. In addition to that, Strahd, Curse of Strahd, has some of the deepest themes of any
Yeah.
other Dungeons and Dragons module. Because I mean, it touches on, these are all dark themes, by the way, but it touches on, suicide,
Hmm.
abuse, loss, um, just this really heavy stuff
Yeah.
that you're not going to find in Lost Mine of Phandelver or Storm King's Thunder
Hmm.
or any high fantasy, unless of course you put it in there yourself.
Yeah. I think that's that's the coolest part about Curse of Strahd is that you get to play Strahd as his own character, or you get to be him essentially.
Yeah.
Um, because he's basically omnipotent in this land because it's he's created it. So it's because I played it with I'm doing it for two groups. I finished one group and I'm with the second one, and it's crazy to see how they sort of just at one point it kind of clicks to them. They're like, look, anything we do, there's a pretty good chance he's gonna know we're doing it,
Yeah.
and it's really cool. But I also like the fact that Strahd's he's not gonna kill them. He's not gonna kill the adventurers because if he does, to me at least, it means that they're a threat. They could be a threat to him, and if they're a threat to him, it means he was naive enough or ignorant enough to let them in. So he his goal isn't to kill them; it's to break them into submission, so where they won't do
Mhm.
anything.
Right. And
And
then kill them.
yeah, well, yeah. Um, and out of like mercy or whatever when he's done. But it's cool to do that. But it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you do that as Strahd, and you kind of sometimes it works, and your players are like, "Oh, should we just give up now?" I ran into that with my second group that I was playing, and I was like, "Oof, maybe I should tone it down a little bit."
Yeah. There's it's definitely a balancing act when you're running the game. Because you as the DM, you're God basically. You can do
Mm-hmm.
anything you want, and then you're given this character of Strahd, and you're given license to basically screw with your party because Strahd can be anywhere within the land. He travels. He's not this entity that sits in his lair
Mm-hmm.
brooding. He moves around. He's a very active villain, which I think is fairly unique
Yeah.
among Dungeons and Dragons mythos. Because I mean, Nesnar, for example, I mean, we keep coming back to Lost Mine of Phandelver because I know we both played it. Nesnar, he doesn't walk around. The
No, he
Black
waits.
Spider, he's just always chilling in his lair.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with the dragon, he's just chilling in his lair. Now, of course, you can extend that and make them move around, of course, but
Yeah.
um, per the module, they just sit there. They're very passive, and Strahd isn't like that.
Yeah.
So with that power comes great responsibility. You really have to be careful that you aren't using it too much, that you aren't breaking your party
Yeah.
beyond their limits.
And I think it's so cool. I think that's it's something that I don't think any other campaign could say they do. Um and it's just it's fascinating because I mean you think if you're a party member, and I know it's hard to this is like third level chess or like three-dimensional chess, but if you're if Strahd is constantly messing with you,
Well,
and this guy,
most chess is three-dimensional, by
or
the way.
sorry, was it 4D chess with
Yeah,
the time travel thingy?
yeah,
But it's you got to think if Strahd is constantly harassing you, you're doing something right because he wouldn't be giving you that much attention.
yeah, certainly.
Um,
Yeah,
but again, that's kind of like you got to be thinking on like a meta level at that point. Which most people are. Most people are like, oh god, he's here. Oh god. But so we talked a little bit before with the witches and everything about how Red is written. Strahd is pretty unbalanced and it's kind of disjointed at certain points. What is your favorite change that you've made to it?
Buster, 100% hands down, Buster the Bust.
Oh, which one is that? I don't think I've seen all your videos.
Oh, shame on you.
I'm
Um,
sorry.
so in Van Richten's Tower, um, now, so Van Richten's Tower, in the module as written, it's basically empty. It's a
Mhm.
3-floor tower. Is it 3 or is it 4 floors? I forget.
I
Um,
think it's four.
okay, so yeah, I think it's 4 floors. So you got your base level, and then your second level, your third level, and then the bedroom up top. The second and third levels basically have nothing in them. And the first level is essentially just where the elevator stops. And that's it. There's nothing there. It is so uninteresting. And so when I was tackling that chapter, I'm like, okay, what can we change? What can we put in here to make it interesting? And it took probably a good 6 months or more to get to a satisfying answer. Because, I mean, the first iteration of this was creating a whole underground laboratory for Kazan, who was, the builder of this tower. And he was going to be like trapped in a time loop of his own making, and he was going to be like a chrono wizard. And obviously that never happened. We went through different other variations with, what can we do to the door puzzle? Maybe we can make it like a clock. I kept coming back to this time thing, and eventually I ditched the whole time thing, and that was very much for the better. And so I stripped the ideas just down to their bare minimum, try to keep it simple. So I'm like, all right, Van Richten has been living in this tower for a while. He's moved out temporarily, and Esmeralda's moved in. Okay, what's going to be here? Well, obviously, they're monster hunters. They have supplies. They're going to have to, keep their stuff somewhere. Okay, so that's floor one. Floor one's going to be full of crates and, all their crap. Okay, floor two, which, by the way, has nothing in it in the module. It's just a bunch of trash. I'm like, okay, maybe this was a library. I mean, because it's a wizard's tower. What does a wizard do? What does a wizard have? He's got books. He's got experiments and stuff like that.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, floor two is going to be a library. Floor three, okay, maybe that's screw it, an observatory. So yeah, we turned the third floor into this old observatory, which is now broken. And the stars that are on the ceilings, they are the constellations from whatever homeland the players are from. And then, of course, floor four is the bedroom. But back to Buster. In addition to making the tower into an interesting set piece in and of itself, I wanted to put some meaningful interactivity in there. And those two words are central to a lot of the revisions in my guides. Meaningful interactivity. Something for the characters to do, someone for them to talk to, etc. And so I'm like, okay, we can't really put a living being in here because Esmeralda's living here. Van Richten was living there. It used to be a wizard. So a talking statue? Okay. All right, maybe it's just a bust. What would I call him?
Buster. That's perfect.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we did some stuff with Kazan. We made him a composite character with Exithander because there's 2 liches in this module, and that's just 1 lich too many. So I got rid of Kazan and just made it Exithander all the way through. So Buster is, he's the image of Exithander back when he was a man. And he's been left alone in the tower for hundreds and hundreds of years. He's seen this thing fall down around him. He's seen the elements come in. He's seen looters ransack the place. And on the second floor where he's stuck into the wall with like sovereign glue or something, all he's had for entertainment are these books that are just consequentially laying open on the floor near him. So he's been reading the same books, the same pages for decades. Maybe a breeze will come through, flip a page here and there, and that's a big thing. But then along comes Esmeralda, and she's actually nice to him. She turns the pages, and he is smitten. Because he's been reading this book of romantic poetry for God knows how long. So that's his whole world, is this romance poetry.
Aww.
And Esmeralda is she's the real deal for him. And she's the one that actually gives him his name. Exithander didn't care. He was just a bust that he could talk to and whatnot, bounce ideas off of. So he was never named. And Esmeralda, she's like, all right, we're gonna call you Buster. That's gonna be your name. and there we go. And everybody seems to love Buster, and I'm kind of jealous because I've never actually gotten to run Buster.
Really? Oh, I could definitely work him into my current one. They've not been to the tower yet.
Okay. Well,
Um,
I'd love to hear that how that goes. But yeah, every group I've heard of, they just like fall in love with Buster.
oh yeah, no, it sounds really cool, or it sounds super interesting. One of my issues, especially with like the Amber Temple, is there's all this really cool lore about it that you basically players can't really figure out. They can never, well, they'll never be able to really know what happened there. Um, unless I mean there's I think there's someone they can talk to in the Amber Temple, but
Yeah,
it's
Exothanter.
yeah, it's just is it I thought it was a servant. I don't know. I haven't run the Amber Temple in a while,
Sure.
but yeah, no, I think it's there's all this really cool lore in Strahd,
Hmm.
and it's a shame that some of it is kind of harder to get to.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's definitely a huge amount of stuff that your party will probably never see, but it can definitely inform the world that you create and what you put before them.
mhm. And so, with your favorite addition you've made out of the way, what do you think is the hardest part of Strahd as written?
As written, the hardest part is probably making Irina a likable character.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely you don't get too much to go on with her character.
No, she's definitely a blank slate.
Yeah.
Um, in one of the upcoming videos on my channel, we actually are going to talk about Irina and some of the other companions as well. We're going through all of the NPC companions one by one by one, talking about their motivations, how you can gain their trust, the pros and cons, and on over on my Patreon, we have some additional information on how to role play these characters. And I really think we've done Irina a bit of justice here, because your party is thrown into Barovia, and then they go through Death House, and then they come into the village of Barovia, and then immediately they're like, "Hey, here's this woman. Go take her somewhere.
Hmm.
Bye."
Yeah, her life is in your hands now.
Right. Which, I mean, yeah, that kind of worked back in the '70s when Curse of Strahd was a one-shot dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Curse of Strahd's adherence to the first edition content, I think, is its biggest weakness, because
Yeah.
a lot of it is literally just copy and pasted word for word from this, I think, 1978 adventure.
Yeah. And that blew me away.
Yeah, I pulled up the original Ravenloft i6 module, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed. Not in i6, but in Curse of Strahd. I'm like, really? Basically everything here is a carbon copy. Especially
I didn't know
Irina.
it was that strict to it. I thought it was
Oh
it
yeah.
expanded a lot, but I guess not. Wow, that's wow. I
Well,
should
I mean,
give it a
yes,
read.
it expanded a lot, because i6 only contained the village of Barovia and Castle Ravenloft, and that was it. That's
Hmm.
literally the extent. Maybe Zerfpool Falls was in there, because you still had to get a Taraka deck or a Taraka reading.
Yeah.
But everything else outside Vallaki and Krezk, that's not there.
Yeah. I mean, Ravenloft is definitely big enough for like a one shot.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So but you were saying yeah, so or with Irina. I mean, when you were running it before yourself, what did you do to kind of make her a likable character?
Well, so I made her one kind. Um,
Hmm.
she was very nice to the characters. So when I put my characters into Barovia, I took their crap away. Like, they went to sleep in an inn, and whatever they were not wearing did not come with them.
Oh,
So we had one character in a bathrobe, another came through naked.
okay.
They didn't have their packs or anything. So Irina, maybe she's a bit of a seamstress. That's what noble women do, right?
Hmm.
They sew. Um, and so I had her make them packs so that they could carry their stuff. So a bit of an endearing act right there.
Yeah, I think that's the if I mean simplistically, I think the best way to make or one of the easiest ways to make your party like a character is to have that character give them free stuff,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
And that psychology extends to the real world.
Hmm.
If somebody wants you to like them, they're gonna, here's a pie, here's some cookies. They'll do something nice and positive
Yeah.
towards you. And that same thing goes for NPC characters.
And so I mean, yeah, it's just a thing of I wanted to make her feel more impactful than just like, oh, if she is gone, the party doesn't have an extra body on the field, you know. That being said, her red is written stat block is garbage. Whenever I throw her in combat, I give her Ismark stat block, which is a bit better.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I definitely agree. That's I guess that speaks to a lot of Curse of Strahd as well for me. Is I find it hard to give so many different characters good personalities that are memorable.
Yeah.
Especially because sometimes you only see these people for a short while,
Oh
like
yeah.
like the abbot. You know, in both times I've done, once they go see the abbot of Saint Markovia, they don't make a second trip back, and it
he's
sucks
that he's
because
that he's that creepy, huh?
I do like him though. I especially like the version as I did watch your thing of the Abbey of Saint Markovia, where he's very disconnected, and he's like, you don't need a face. You can still do things without a face. You
You
know?
do not need to your face to eat or
Yeah, it's just like
breathe.
that. And I think that was, I mean, another like props to you because that's really good. Definitely a super super good addition to a otherwise pretty bland character that they don't go too hard on.
Yeah.
Um, whose lore again is really cool that is not talked about. I don't think you can find out that he was an angel. Um,
Until you try to smack him, you would never know that he is an angel.
oh yeah.
I mean,
Um,
at that point, he casts off his human garb, and he's just like,
mm,
"Oh, you gotta die."
yeah. I mean, to bring a full circle, I mean, that's kind of the thing that makes Curse of Strahd such a awesome uh campaign to run. I mean, like I say, I had a hard time doing it because it was my first one, but it's easily I think it's gonna be my favorite because it gives you so much liberty to do so much.
Yeah, I've said this before on the Discord server, but Curse of Strahd is basically a 250-page writing prompt.
Mm-hmm. The first time I ever messaged you privately was when my characters helped Lady Wachter overthrow Valaki. The book says that's a thing that can happen, but it says nothing about what actually happens if that happens.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally open to the DM. Like, how does that play out?
Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, there's just nothing on this. And so
Nope.
you helped me craft a pretty cool um whole interaction where the town is filled with supporters of her and stuff, and the players got to get her out of power too.
Nice. Yeah, my party just murdered her, and then the next morning, Baron Wachter or Baron Volakovich was thrown over the side of the palisade from a noose.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if they're both gone, there's just that's all the city needed. Just get them both out. Have anyone else except Isaac Strasny. Anyone else in town is good though.
Any functioning adult, 2021.
Yeah, for real. um, but so to speak on more broader terms, when did you start playing D&D altogether?
So I started playing D&D late 2017. So I've been into role-playing games since, gosh, 1999. I was
Mm,
13 years old. I'm 34 now, pushing 35.
okay.
And you know, role-playing games they've come into my life, they've left my life, but they always come back. And role-playing has been this role-playing and collaborative storytelling has been this big creative outlet for me, for the past 21 years.
Yeah.
And in late 2017, probably around springtime, I got the itch again. Like, I really want to sit down and tell a collaborative story. And so I looked at my wife and I said, we should try Dungeons and Dragons. And she looked at me like, what? Excuse me?
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome
but
though.
I eventually, I wore down, and a few months later, we got a game going with her, myself, and a couple of our close friends. It was around the dining room table. My dungeon master screen was made of just a folded bit of like an Amazon shipping box. Um,
That's perfect.
and yeah, and we started going through the starter set, Lost Mine of Phandelver.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a blast. I was hooked on Dungeons and Dragons after that first session. Granted, it only lasted two more sessions because it's just not their kind of game, and that's okay. But for me, it just here I am. I'm still going.
Yeah. Um. So that was like what you see. Like you liked role playing games before. What did you play before Dungeons and Dragons?
For it was a mix of a lot of online stuff. So I started in the original AOL chat rooms
Oh
um, of
wow.
of of yore.
Yeah. The early 2000s.
Yes. So I started there, and I was terrible. I was a slow typer, and I was an annoying teenager. So you can imagine what it was like. Very cringeworthy, but I eventually got better. I had some mentors along the way that helped me out with my storytelling and descriptions and whatnot. And eventually, some of that transitioned into other online games like Star Wars Galaxies. I played that for maybe 4 or 5 years on the role playing servers, and that was big for me. I got to play a villain
Mm.
throughout most of that, and that was a lot of fun. And there was other chat rooms and message boards that came and went in that period of time, but those were the big ones for me that lasted for years.
Yeah. I mean, the I'm trying to think any role playing stuff I did when I was younger, and I'm 21, and I remember Roblox was pretty big when that came out. So that was, like 9-year-old Thomas was RPing pretty hard on Roblox back in the
Okay.
day.
Gosh, is it that old? I've never actually played Roblox,
Oh, I
so
think it came out in like 2006. I remember being like pretty young when it first came out, and everyone was like,
okay.
"Oh, what is this?" Um, but yeah, it's same thing, right? I'd always really liked that sort of world building and making your own story and stuff.
Yeah.
And around 2016 or 2015, I had a friend who was super into it. He didn't have fifth edition though; he had third edition, and I played some of that, and then he upgraded to fifth and really liked it. And I just I started learning more and more about it, and I'm pretty comfortable as a DM. I think I prefer being a DM to a player,
Oh, 100%.
right? I mean, I don't get me wrong though. I do like breaking it up every once in a while, um, and having like being a character in a campaign or a one shot. But I'm definitely more in my happy place as a DM.
Same here. I've actually only played Dungeons and Dragons once.
Yeah.
I
What
mean, granted, I've played one character. It was multiple sessions. I think it was like 2 or 3 sessions, but I've only played one character, and
what
I
character
by
was it?
by far, it was a bard.
Mm.
I actually forget his name, but we were being run through Sunless Citadel, and
Ooh.
that was fun. I enjoyed it, but I enjoy being a dungeon master a lot more. I
Yes.
like I I like being constantly engaged rather than waiting for my turn.
Yep.
And I like being able to play all the characters rather than just one.
Yeah, it's I yeah, the engagement is the big thing for me too. I like to be active for the whole session.
Yeah.
Um, I also like making the stories. I mean, my friends say I'm too creative. Or well, they say I'm very creative. I think I'm too creative at times where I'll think of like I'll start writing of something and then I will think of something way in advance and I'm stuck on that thing. And I'm like, I gotta do all this middle stuff, and yeah, it gets to a point where I sometimes get a little disjointed. But I like I like playing a character that that is my own. So in Curse of Strahd, for example, I put in a character called Lionel Bennett, who is essentially a Belmont. But he was in there because for the purpose of being a slight nudge to the party to go to certain places. Because I feel like that's another problem sometimes is uh, if the party isn't doing certain things, like if they go to like one of their items was in Argynvost, and if unless they go out exploring or they ask someone at Vallaki about rumors, they don't
Uh huh.
they never really hear about Argynvost.
Yeah.
So Lionel is like, I heard rumors from town about a ghost dragon at a haunted mansion. Maybe there's something over there.
Right. So one of my techniques for seeding those little hints is background conversation. So for Argynvost, maybe they're sitting at the inn, and then when there's you give the players an opportunity to talk amongst themselves or do their own interactions. But when there's a lull in the conversation, I like to inject these little snippets that they hear in the background. So maybe two drunkards would be talking in the background, and one of them says, "Hey, I dare you to run up to that haunted mansion over there and nick a sword. You come back, I'll give you 50 gold for it." And then they've got this idea, oh, haunted mansion. Huh.
That's pretty cool.
Okay.
That's clever.
And then they might ask about that. So, figure out those ways to give this information in a very organic way. Not everything has to come from, I'd like to ask about rumors. Maybe they just overhear something.
That would definitely, in hindsight, probably would have been the better way to go. Well, since that was like my first run of the campaign, I did get I did get better at it. For the second one, something similar, where it was one of the kids who told them about it, who was like, hey, I heard something about it, or Dad says if I don't stop, he's gonna feed me to the dragon at the haunted mansion, or something like that. Something akin to that, where the kid said it, and the players were like, "Huh, what's this?"
Oh, hey, there you go. That's perfect.
But yeah, again, I just think it's really cool. It gives you so much freedom to do stuff. It's both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, there's not a lot of hand holding, but a lot of freedom and a lot of ability to really stretch your wings and express yourself as a dungeon master and as a storyteller.
Yeah. So another question I ask other DMs is what is the problem class or problem character that you hate the most? Not hate, but like for me, characters who can fly and barbarians with the great weapon mastery. Those are my problem characters, because those guys are just super strong. Do you have anything like that you your pet peeves?
Oh, paladins with divine smite and all sorts of other resistances.
Yeah,
they're very like I would during play testing for the Binding of Vampire, my brother-in-law was playing a paladin, divine smite, level 11, all that jazz. He's kitted out, and I couldn't hit him. And he is just wailing on the aspect of Vampire, which for the folks at home, this is another thing I've added in my guide series. And he was, this aspect of a god only lasted a few rounds against him. I'm like, okay, all right, well, maybe it needs to be a little tougher.
Yeah, I that's what I had to do. The players don't see damage calculation, but I had to go out there. I had to nerf some of the damage, and I think it's interesting because Curse of Strahd has these parts where it's so unbalanced. Like if your characters go to Berez and they try to fight Baba Lysaga, they're just gonna die. She's too strong. And
generally if they're low level, and especially if that house comes into play.
Oh yeah, I feel like the fight against Baba Lysaga in her house is harder than the fight against Strahd if he's not in his castle.
Certainly if he's not in his castle, most definitely.
Yeah,
because Strahd can't throw boulders.
His castle is just, when he's in his castle, he plays like a poke and run game.
Yes.
And it's like the way you really got to get him is to make use of the hold undead that the Symbol of Ravenkind gives you. My players were not figuring that out. They were like, oh, he probably has some way to break out of it. I'm like, well, this is one of your legendary items. I mean,
right? Yeah, you guys worked really hard. You got a nice card reading for it. Come on, guys, use it. But Baba Lysaga is actually not really that difficult in and of herself. Again, when that house comes into play and starts throwing boulders, then it changes the game a bit.
Yeah.
But Baba Lysaga herself is kind of a pushover, especially if you have a party with ranged capabilities.
Yes, I agree.
because the action, she's basically by herself. The action economy is very much against her. And unless those boulders are flying, well, everything's concentrated on her, and she's just not going to last that long.
Yeah, I mean, I think if she has her floating cauldron or her floating skull, that can make things difficult. But you know, 9 times out of 10, if you have a 4-person party, one of them's gonna have some range,
Yeah,
and the other people are gonna be able to throw hand axes or javelins or something. But what I do really love Baba Lysaga and the Swamps of Berez. I think it's one of the more interesting parts of Curse of Strahd. Um, and again, I think it's really funny that Strahd has no idea who Baba Lysaga is. Like he's never met her,
right.
and she refers to Strahd as like her baby boy.
Yeah,
But
she's like, "Who's your mommy?"
yes, so the players were like, "Oh, this is Strahd's mother. And surely, if we show him that we killed his mother, he won't like that." And then they went and like I think they beheaded her and were like, "Strahd, look what we have." And he was like, "I have no idea who that is."
Who the hell is
Yeah,
this?
it was literally like Thanos from in Endgame, where he's like,
I
"I've
have
never
no
seen
idea who you
I've
are.
never seen you before in my life," and I thought that was hilarious. Um, again, I wish there was a way for the players to know that that was just Strahd's crazy wet nurse who was blessed
Right.
by the dark powers.
Yeah, there's really there's nothing there that says, not Strahd's mother, um, beyond the fact that maybe they've read the tome, and I mean, even in the tome, there's no indication of who his mom really
Yeah.
is.
You can put stuff in the tome though, and I really like that about it. You can pretty. I mean, it's got some pages, but you can really put a bunch of stuff
Oh
in
yeah,
there if you want to tie some ends
and
to it.
and if you're really bold, you just send your players copies of I Strahd.
Ooh, I want to read that. I have not read it yet.
You know what? For a pulp novel, it is actually pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah,
Um,
I'll pick it up.
yeah, the War Against Aslan, the sequel to it. I mean, it was okay. It was decent, but
Mhm.
I Strahd is actually a good book in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, I love that character so much. Just Strahd himself. It's
Mhm.
so many so many levels, so many ways to portray him. Um, and the book is one of the worst ways to if you want to learn how to play Strahd and make him a good villain. I do not recommend reading what the book says because the book contradicts itself multiple times. The book says at the beginning, Strahd is emotionless. He's cold. He doesn't feel anything. And then if your fortune says he's in Sergei's tomb, it's like Strahd is draped over his brother's coffin, crying and weeping and all this other stuff. And it's
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's coming, as someone who's written a very lengthy document and gone over the module multiple times. I always tend to take a real world look at how the book is laid out, how it's produced.
mhm.
And one thing to bear in mind is that it is not the work of one person. Um, there's a whole bunch of people that wrote this, and they all were each assigned a piece.
Oh, that's
Like,
interesting. That's
like,
a different way to look at
right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, like one person wrote the introduction, another person wrote, aspects of Castle Ravenloft. Granted, that was, Tracy and Laura Hickman in 1978.
Mhm.
Um, and then, another person wrote, the Amber Temple. And it's the editor's job to look over all of this and make sure it's cohesive. So the fact that there are, Strahd is cold and emotionless in the introduction and then emotional in the castle, or that um, there's two liches, there's Kazan, and then there's Exathanter.
Mhm.
These are things that you would imagine would be caught in editing, right?
Yes.
Because the writers don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
They probably don't know who each other is. Um, so the marching orders, they come from the overall designer, Chris, and then the writers do their thing. It all comes back, and then the editor is supposed to make sure it gets turned into one cohesive whole, which obviously doesn't always happen because we do have these contradictions, even in how Strahd became a vampire, which has given rise to the the bloody wars of the vestiges are the dark powers, or the vestiges and the dark powers are separate.
Yes, I was gonna. That's another
Those are,
question I was gonna ask you was
yeah,
about that, because
yeah,
that's another thing. Do you think the sarcophagi, the vestiges? Did you play those as the dark powers, or did you play the dark
absolutely
powers
not.
as? Yeah, me too. I play the dark
Absolutely
powers
not.
as this force
So
that's always around,
yes,
like an evil
so
god.
so as you can imagine, I've read a lot of Ravenloft lore,
Mm-hmm.
even from older editions. And I'm very much in the camp that the dark powers and the vestiges are separate. And the reason that these two camps exist is because of a lack of editing,
Yes,
or not necessarily lack of editing, but a lack of attention to detail in that process.
that makes sense.
Because the introduction of the module says one thing, and then the introduction to the chapter Amber Temple says something completely different.
Yeah,
Um, so both interpretations are valid. I just think my interpretation is more valid because
yeah,
I rely on that stuff from older editions where the dark powers, they're this nebulous force. They're
yeah.
unnamed, unknowable, uncountable,
Amorphous.
amorphous. And then the vestiges themselves, they're actual things. They're named. You can count them. They have
Yeah,
limited power and potential. They are very much less than the dark powers.
yeah. And they're, I mean, I always figured the dark gifts they bestow are just the dark powers acting through them, um,
Sure.
in a way. But I mean, if you read like the Dungeon Master's Guide and you talk and you read about the Shadowfells, it says the Shadowfells are home to the dark powers, which would
Mhm.
make me again assume it's not just these vestiges. Um, Real quick, I do have a question about the Amber Temple. When you ran your players there, did they take any of the dark gifts?
Um, no, in fact, I actually um I did not actually offer them through the sarcophagi. What I did is I offered them through dreams well before they ever got to the Amber Temple.
Hmm.
So in my guide, the Amber Temple is leaking. So the Amber Enclave, which is what I call the this guild of wizards that built the Amber Temple, they took it upon themselves to take this evil out of the world and basically put it in prison. And so they built the Amber Temple, which was a monumentally terrible idea because obviously, what happened.
Yeah, focus
Um,
darkness in one spot.
right, exactly. And so they all went mad and killed each other, and some of them transformed. And the wards and seals that were meant to keep this prison closed have been wearing down. Magic isn't permanent in,
Hmm.
in my mind. So the vestiges that they've been reaching out as much as they can, which is not much, and touching the minds of various Barovians. And they come to them in dreams and they offer them, to grant them a wish or whatever. And in the case of my characters, they're like, "Hey, will you be my champion?" And they come to them in the guise of someone friendly. Like for my cleric, she was a cleric of Eldath, the goddess of peace. And so I had her wake up in a dream. She crawls out of her tent, and just the forest that they were camping in is just covered in ash. And then this very familiar looking figure, I didn't say it was Eldath, I just said it looked familiar to her, was sitting there. And she, in the way that this figure spoke, it implied that it was Eldath, but again, never said it was. And basically, I twisted the whole idea of peace as like, well, if there are no people, it's really peaceful.
Oh man, yeah,
So
that's good.
burn them all.
Yeah.
And will you be my champion? And the cleric accepted. And so she woke up in the morning with she's just covered in just charred black skin, and she has this fire ability. And these dark gifts, they come with their own caveat that I've written into the
Hmm.
guide as well, beyond what is in the module. And that allows them to get the experience and exposure to these vestiges and this idea that there is something out there besides Strahd, um,
Yeah.
much earlier than the Amber Temple, which is almost end game content.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's I feel like well, Amber Temple's like suggested level 9, so
Yeah.
it's where I put the Sun Sword in the first run. You get the Sun Sword, then you fight Strahd. But when I did it, I did the Amber Temple pretty raw, and my players I figured they would have assumed like, hey, this is where Strahd got his powers. Strahd is evil. There's evil things here. Probably shouldn't mess with the gifts they give. They were arguing about who was going to take which gift. They were like, "Oh, I want this one and this one. You got the last one. I want this one." So by the end, they were all super cursed, and I was like, "Wow, I can't believe this."
Yeah, you know, that's one of the things. It's interesting to see and read about, but from a logical perspective, I've never really understood that. Like, you're a group of heroes. You're going into this hole in the ground.
Yeah,
Here are these black wisps that are whispering evil things into your ear.
in
Would you like
sarcophagi, like
would you like a lollipop?
this is
No.
it's like the
Don't
textbook.
accept don't accept candy from these things.
Yeah, especially when they find the one coffin in the final room, it's like, oh, this is the gift of the vampire, and
Right.
it's like yes, no, this is what made Strahd crazy is he took too many of these bad boys. Well, he was crazy
Right.
before, but he took too
Yeah.
many of these things, and I was like, wow, I never. That your party's never gonna do exactly what you think they'll do, but I was like,
No.
wow, I never thought you guys would have came into this place and just started taking curses left and right.
Right. Yeah, like I know your behavior can be unpredictable, but I never knew your decision making capabilities was
Yeah,
this poor.
they were like, "Oh, we're gonna need these things to fight Strahd." I'm like, "No, you've got fortunes telling you the things you're gonna need to fight Strahd. None of these things said, hey, take sarcophagus curses.
Yeah.
Said find the
Thankfully,
sword, find the
I
amulet, and go
I
have
mean,
fun."
thankfully, my party had a decent amount of sense, at least I think. And then, of course, I basically tricked them into accepting these powers, which is a
Mhm.
very vestige thing to do. But to just go into the Ember Temple and saying, "Yep, I want that dark power," is just a weird thing to me.
Yeah, and some of them are, I mean, to its benefit or to its favor, some of the dark gifts are pretty dang good. The
Oh
one that
yeah,
gives you true sight in exchange for like you now are obsessed with death and waiting for the end. Unless your players are going to be
yeah,
really good RPers, that's not much of a detriment. Or the one that gives you just 30 extra health, and the drawback is your face is now covered in black fur. I'm like, come on, what about the one
yeah.
where it's like you can now fly for 5 feet, and every day you've got to make a Constitution saving throw, and if you fail, you die forever. I'm like, now that's a bit more cursed than I'm thinking of.
Yeah, the dark powers really need, or not dark powers, but the dark gifts really need a lot of work.
Yeah.
Which is why I came up with my dark gift system. So you get a bane, or you get a boon, and then you get a bane. The boon is the power that is bestowed upon you. Yeah, sure, you can cast Cone of Cold at will. Yeah, not a problem.
Hmm.
But the bane, of course, is something that happens to your character. Black fur or icy cold skin or whatever, something that's noticeable. But on top of that, and this is not known to the characters, whenever they use their boon, their power, um, a piece of their soul is taken away.
Ooh.
They don't know that when they accept it. Only after the first time that they use it do they get a hint that something's wrong. So I tell them, all right, it feels like a piece of you has been scooped out. You feel a bit more hollow. And
Hmm.
then on every subsequent usage, I have them roll a D100. And the DC starts at 1, and then it just climbs every single time. I think it climbs like by like 3 or 5 or something like that. And if they roll under that DC, they lose the power. So they lose their boon. They keep the bane. So they're always disfigured. And they can no longer be resurrected by normal means.
Oh wow. No,
Because
that's really good.
because their soul is condemned
Yeah.
to this vestige. It basically becomes food.
I'm definitely gonna use that in my current group. That's really good. That's super good. Um I have done a thing. One of my players is a an Asimar. They live to be like 160 or something, and they took the one that, well, basically I'm doing it sort of similar thing to you, where it's affecting their mind, it's affecting their soul. But because he's gonna live so long, it's gonna affect him the most. Um, and I am running sort of like a sequel to Strahd. I'm connecting it to another module, but I can explain that later. That's, you know, um, but so to wrap up this part about like Curse of Strahd real quick. My final question is the end of Curse of Strahd is kind of a sad one, not a sad one, but a unfortunate one for the players if you do it right as written, where it says, the dark powers, they feed off of Strahd's pain too much. So after the players leave, Barovia eventually or essentially resets. Strahd comes back and the cycle starts anew.
Hmm.
Do you make any changes to how that ends, or do you keep it
Oh,
like that?
absolutely. No. So it obviously can end like that if the party just leaves. So the ending, we've redone that with the Binding of Vampyr. So going back to the Amber Temple for just a second, one of the Amber sarcophagi is broken, and there's no nameplate or anything. You don't know who it is. And then in the big main chamber, there is another sarcophagi that contains Vampyr, who is presumably who gave Strahd his vampirism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in my guide, I've actually swapped those. So Vampyr was in the broken sarcophagi. He's not there anymore. Strahd busted him out. And then the big sarcophagus is now empty. It's waiting for something. The wizards never got around to filling it because they killed themselves. But Vampyr is free, and he's basically feeding off all the souls that Strahd is killing. Okay, so if you want to think of Strahd in terms of a warlock, he's not a warlock, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of a warlock, Vampyr would be his patron.
Yeah.
So what we've done in that case is at the end of the module, once Strahd is killed, it should be made clear that that's not the end. Vampyr will bring him back because Strahd is this big old siphon of souls, and Vampyr doesn't want to give that up.
Yeah.
So he's gonna resurrect his guy, And if you really want to free Barovia, you've got to put Vampyr back where he belongs, in the Amber Temple. And that's this whole binding ritual that we've created and play tested, and hopefully it's a lot of fun to do this, because you've got a bit of time after killing Strahd to go and gather these material components throughout the land. So
Mm-hmm.
you go from this huge knockdown, drag out battle in Castle Ravenloft, and then you get to do some normal quests, get some breathing time.
Yeah.
And then we use the standing stones, because they've really got no explicit purpose in the module. So we use the standing stones as this summoning site for Vampyr. And you can't kill a god, but you've got to survive him.
Yeah.
And if you can survive him, then you can lock him away into prison.
Exactly. You
And
can't. Yeah. That's
yeah,
really cool.
and only then is Barovia safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's like. So, have you released that yet, or is that on your channel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna take some notes from that. I did something a bit different with mine, but I'll that's for another time. We're almost out of time here. So the last thing I want to ask you is where do you plan on going with all this stuff in the future?
With all defined stuff
Like
in this
your
case.
channel and
Gotcha.
your Strahd content and stuff.
Sure, yeah. So Strahd, Curse of Strahd proper is basically done. Okay. We're going over all of the allies and whatnot, but the actual guide content is finished. We are content complete. At this point, I'm compiling everything together into one document, and I'm going over, I'm proofing it, I'm doing all the formatting and making sure it all looks good. And then it's going to be released on DM's Guild as an updated version, so people can buy it and they can get it all in just one package.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, we're going to take a look at Ravenloft. as a whole, starting with Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which is coming out on May 18th.
Hey,
So
yeah, I'm
there's a
excited.
lot of there's a lot of good stuff in there, I think. And I know a lot of the books that have been coming out recently have not been released to huge fanfare.
Hmm.
So a lot of people, knocking them down a little bit here and there. And I kind of hope the book is mediocre at best, because that means I've got a lot to do.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Good.
Yeah. And
That's
so
interesting.
beyond that, we want to come up with a lot of video ideas to help entertain and inform people, and grow our channel that way. We're also releasing the Deck of Many Quests. You can actually buy that online on Indiegogo now. Physical version will hopefully be shipping around August, September timeframe. I'm getting the paperwork signed on that today, and then sending over a buttload of money to the printers to get those made.
Awesome.
And just growing the business from there. Lunch Break Heroes is it's going to be a big thing.
Yeah, I'm excited I got you while you're still, getting up there. Um, so again, thank you for being on like a lot. This is super awesome. Like I said, I'm watching your stuff and it really helped me out. So it's a huge honor to be able to talk to you like this and nerd out with you
Well,
for an hour.
hey, nay, no problem. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
My name is Steve from Lunch Break Heroes, and this has been the Power of Four.